Does man, that marvel of the universe, that glorious paradox that set me across the stars, still make war against his brother, keep his neighbor's children starving? That is a line from one of my favorite movies of all time, which is the 1968 Planet of the Apes film. Now, we're going to be talking about this movie in this video, but I should say that this is not a movie review. This is a parable of the Planet of the Apes, although it could double as a movie review. So let's get started. Now, I'm going to assume that if you clicked on this video, you've already seen the movie, so I'm not going to worry about spoilers and all that kind of stuff. We're going to take a in-depth look at the movie and see the themes in it and how they correlate to life in our world. Now, the story centers around four main characters that all have different worldviews, and we're going to go over each one, and we're going to go over Taylor's worldview last because it's kind of centers around the whole point of the story. But starting with Dr. Zaius, Dr. Zaius is the defender of the faith of the apes, and his position is that the sacred scrolls of the apes have chronicled the history of the planet, and that it is the one and only truth of the world. Now, Zira and Cornelius are the two scientists who contest this worldview, and they believe that through archaeology and study of human anatomy, that they can find a deeper truth and possibly find the origins of the apes through looking at the primitive humans that live on the planet. Now, Taylor is a human that comes from the past, the deep and ancient past, and he arrives on the planet, and he can no longer distinguish that it is in fact his own planet because it has changed so much over time. Now, the interesting thing to look at is the way that each of these characters perceives the world is a truth. It has a truth to it. In other words, the sacred scrolls really do chronicle the history of the apes and the history of the planet, but they don't tell the whole story. Okay? And the archaeologists are searching through these ancient remains, okay, and they're looking for a missing link between the apes and the humans, and they're expecting to find a way that the humans basically evolved into the apes, right? And these characters' paradigm becomes completely shifted when Taylor arrives because they don't know how he fits in to their world. And so, in essence, Taylor represents a discovery that doesn't fit into the worldview of either the scientists or the religious community. And so they have to deal with the situation and see what it does to their worldview. And this is something that happens in reality where people create models. They have a standard model for what they believe is the reality of the world. And anything that doesn't fit into that model is usually ignored or contested in some way. Okay. Now, what is interesting about the Planet of the Apes is that all three of these sides are in essence correct, but they are coming to the truth from a completely different angle from each other, and this causes conflict between all the characters. Now, throughout the whole movie, Dr. Zaius tells the other apes to read the scriptures and see what they say. And to him, everything is either corrupted or misinterpreted to contradict the scriptures. And so his worldview is that the new evidence that is presented is incorrect. Now, if we look at Zira and Cornelius, the two scientists in the film, their worldview is that they're finding new evidence. They're looking at the rocks and the geology of the planet, and they are looking at the anatomy of the humans and seeing similarities between the humans and themselves, and this leads them to conclude that there was a linear progression from humans to apes. Okay? And their new evidence is in contrast to the Holy Book. So there's a great line in the movie where Cornelius says that if his theories were correct, then the sacred scrolls wouldn't be worth their parchment. To which Zira replies, maybe they're not. This demonstrates the perspective of scientists in reality, which is this idea that because new things are being found, that the old books, the old scriptures are no longer valid. Because they do this, they cut out a huge portion of history that could be utilized to paint a bigger picture. Now, both these sides are thrown off guard because when Taylor shows up, he presents a new possibility. And that possibility is that the humans did not evolve into the apes in the way that Zira and Cornelius believe, and that the sacred scrolls only go back to the origins of the apes. And what they all discover on the path is that long ago humans were the dominant form of life, and that some great cataclysm wiped the world clear of this ancient civilization, and that the apes emerged from that cataclysm. And so, in this way, all three of these perspectives come together. Now, one of my favorite scenes in the movie is where they go to the cave in the Forbidden Zone and start digging around and looking at the artifacts of the past. And Cornelius is the discoverer of all these things, so he is showing and making his case for the evolution of the apes. And what he shows is these small devices that have been made, and Taylor looks at them and recognizes all of them and points out that there was a past civilization that predated the apes. And Dr. Zaius looks at the artifacts and says that they could be anything, that they don't prove anything. And this really demonstrates the position of the religious community in our world, where if something new comes into view and it doesn't fit in with the Bible, it's immediately, the conclusion is that something must just be wrong. Something's just out of place. The dates don't match up, or somebody made a mistake with these. Because if they're legitimate, then it undermines the authority of the Bible. It's that view that eliminates modern evidence that causes the scientific community to throw out the Holy Book, because if the new evidence doesn't fit in the Holy Book, then the Holy Book must be wrong. And this dynamic of parsing out the different information and deciding that there's some sort of barrier between these two things is something that is really a man-made barrier. This is something that comes from different worldviews pushing against each other. Okay, rather than looking at all the evidence combined together to get the full picture. Okay. And so to draw the parallels between the movie and reality, the sacred scrolls represent the Bible, and Dr. Zaius represents the religious institutions of the world, Zira and Cornelius represent the scientific community, and Taylor and the Forbidden Zone and the fallen Statue of Liberty represent the great flood of Noah's day and the sinking of Atlantis. And so this is the parable of the Planet of the Apes.